This is a read aloud of chapter 10 from Out of This Furnace. Out of This Furnace was written by Thomas Bell. It's a book about fictional people, but it's based on what it really was like to live in Pittsburgh and work in the steel mills in the 1800s. Our main character in this section, in this chapter, is Kracha. I'm going to read along. You can follow with me and pause anytime you want to answer a question in your Module 20 file. In Homestead, Kracha had helped produce steel plates from red-hot slabs. In Braddock, he helped produce the metal from the raw ore. He was a very minor factor in the extensive, highly involved process of supplying a nation with steel, though it cannot be said that he ever thought of himself in just that way. Mills existed to provide men with jobs, and men worked in mills because they had to work somewhere. Kracha did what he was told and was paid for it every 2 weeks. His interest ended there. There was little about his work to make him feel it was important or necessary. On the contrary, the company lost no opportunity to impress upon him that his services could be dispensed with at any time, that it was really doing him an enormous favor by letting him work at all. Day turn or night turn, he left home at 5:30. All over the First Ward, all over Braddock, and in every steel town in the valley, men were putting on their coats and picking up their lunch buckets and going off to work. Out of the houses, down through the mean streets and alleys to the mill. Twice a day, morning and evening, the First Ward was lively with men going to work or coming home. To that rhythm, the life of the steel towns was set. As a rule, Dubick was waiting for him in front of Old Wold's Saloon at the corner of Washington and 13th, where the town ended and the mill began. He was waiting this spring evening, his clean face contrasting, like Kracha's own, with the shapeless, work-stained clothes and heavy shoes. They had a quick beer and then crossed 13th Street, climbed the cindery slope of a railway embankment, and at once left the town, the ordinary human world, behind. They went across the black, lifeless plain of the mill yard toward the blast furnaces, looming huge in the early dusk. Rushing flame, oddly soundless, leaped out of their tops at regular intervals as charges were dumped inside, were extinguished as if by a giant breath as the furnace top closed. Farther to the left, past the tall stacks and iron rooftops, the Bessemer's flames lit up the eroded hillsides of North Braddock. There were men ahead of them and behind, a straggling, silent procession. They stumbled over tracks, waited while a dinky pushed smoking ladles of slag toward the river, then went on. Purple arc lights sputtered through a haze that was 3 parts soft coal smoke and 1 part dust. A young man changing carbons in a lamp clung like a monkey to his high perch and yelled to Dubick as he passed. Dubick waved back, and the youth threw a piece of carbon after him. "Steve Bodner," Dubick explained. "He and young Dobetrek go around together." At H furnace, they separated, Kracha going on to F. There he climbed rickety iron stairs and entered the cast house, the covered space around the base of the furnace. It was a low-roofed, murky place, warm with heat from the furnace, its floor marked with ditches that led from the furnace to the edge of the platform, below which empty ladles and cinder buggies waited. The furnace itself, giving no hint of the structure that towered 80 feet above the cast house roof, was a gross, big-bellied affair pierced with small holes which were dazzling bright with the glare of molten metal. Mackenzie, the furnace keeper, was peering into one of the holes as Kracha crossed the cast house to a little shanty where he left his bucket. More men kept arriving, going into the shanty, coming out. From the direction of the stoves came a low, deep hum. The skip hoist ground and rattled outside. They would be tapping soon, Kracha reflected. The cast house had a clean, ready look from the hot furnace to the waiting ladles. Kracha and Dubick were front men, as distinguished from the men who worked at the back of the furnace in the underground stockyard. Men loaded ore, coke, and crushed limestone into skips, which were then pulled onto the skip hoist, a vertical elevator with open sides which lifted them level with the top of the furnace. This was, of course, before the introduction of the inclined automatic skip hoist and of the double bell, a device for keeping the top of the furnace closed during charging and thus preventing the escape of valuable gas. At the top of the hoist, two men called top fillers pulled the skip over a lofty little bridge to the furnace and dumped its contents into the bell, the conical stopper set, point up into the top of the furnace. The men then retreated with the empty skip, signaled the engine men, and the bell was lowered a few feet, permitting the charge to slide into the furnace. Each time the bell was lowered, gas escaped, igniting to make a flame 30 or 40 feet high, which was extinguished with magical suddenness when the bell was lifted into place again. There were times when the front men could take it easy, but the men in the stockyards and on top of the furnaces worked without pause, from whistle to whistle. Charging had to be continuous. Dubik had been put to work in the stockyard when he first came to Braddock, pulling buggies like a mule in a mine for a year before he got a better job in a yard gang, and when Kracha announced his intention of abandoning Homestead before everyone else got the same idea, Dubik had assured him a job in front of the furnace was worth whatever bribe the pusher demanded. But front or back, the work was hard, exhausting, and always dangerous. The steel mills, like the mines and the railroads, had an appallingly bad accident record. In Braddock, it was an exceptional month which didn't see a man crippled or killed outright. American industry, for all its boasting, was still crude and wasteful in its methods. And part of the cost of its education of that technique it was in time to consider somewhat smugly as a uniquely American heritage, a gift of God to the corporations of America, was the lives and bodies of thousands of its workers. Kracha worked from 6 to 6, 7 days a week, 1 week on day turn, 1 week on night. The constant shifting of turns made settlement into an energy-saving routine impossible. Just when he was getting used to sleeping at night, he had to learn to sleep during the day. At the end of each day turn week came the long turn of 24 hours when he went into the mill Sunday morning at 6 and worked continuously until Monday morning. Then home to wash, eat, and sleep until 5 that afternoon when he got up and returned to the mill to begin his night turn week. The long turn was bad, but this first night turn coming on its heels was worse. Tempers flared easily, men fought over a shovel or a look, and it was fatally easy to be careless, to blunder. When work was good, when one full week followed another with little besides paydays to break their monotony, Kracha lived only during his day turn weeks. Night turn weeks were periods of mental fog. He went back and forth to the mill in half a daze, which lasted until the end of his turn Sunday morning, when he was given 24 hours to himself. Sometimes he went to early mass, other times he went directly home and rolled into bed. When he rose late that afternoon, there was little time to do anything. Usually he got drunk. Only whiskey could pierce the shell of his weariness, warm him, make him think well of himself and his world again. Hope sustained him as it sustained them all. Hope and the human tendency to feel that, dreadful though one's circumstances might be at the moment, there were depths of misfortune still unplumbed beneath one. There were people much worse off. In fact, what with a steady job in the blast furnaces, a cozy home on the cinder dump, a friend like Dubik here, and $1 to slap down on Wold's bar of a Saturday night, one was as well-favored a man as could be found in the First Ward. And there was always hope, the hope of saving enough money to go back in triumph to the old country, of buying a farm back in the hills, of going into business for oneself. For a few, their hopes were not in vain. To others, work and hope alike came to a sudden, unreasonable end when they were carried, if machinery or molten metal had left anything to be carried, out of the mill feet first. The greater part went on from day to day, feeling that all this was only temporary, since such things couldn't last, that just before human flesh and blood could stand no more, something would happen to change everything for the better. But it never did. When human flesh and blood could stand no more, it got up at 5 in the morning as usual, and put on its work clothes and went into the mill. And when the whistle blew, it came home.